Hi, welcome back everybody. Kept working on the airplane some more after I got the wings hung, and first step we did was the fuel line hose. The first thing we had to do is to locate where I'm going to enter the fuselage. I have a 90-degree bulkhead fitting, two of those, one for the vent line, one for the fuel line, and as it enters the fuselage, it's going to go aft to the header tank. Routing the fuel line, the one that feeds the header tank, I wanted to put a shutoff valve on there. So I had to fabricate a way to do that, or find a valve I wanted to use and find out how to support it. One of the biggest issues was the seat belt shoulder attach bracket. I had to cut that down a little bit because it was in the way. After that, went ahead and routed the vent line, and I put the bulkhead fittings right next to each other, and which meant I had to angle the vent line bulkhead fitting up a little bit so it would stay out of the way of the one that's feeding the header tank. But I don't think that'll be an issue. That went pretty smoothly. The problem with this side is I had drilled that first off to the left brass fitting a little bit too far aft, just by like maybe 3/16 or so. And by doing that, that top vent line was actually touching the handle for my on and off valve. Just underneath there, I drilled that hole out a little bit bigger where that vent line goes through, and I put a little support to help lift that up so it doesn't touch the handle anymore. So that's what I've done with my fuel lines. Next is to route them inside the header tank. I just took this piece off the fuselage. I shaped it to about 3 inches in width, and now I'm just roughing it up, getting it ready for some micro balloons. So I'm not a fiberglass expert by no means, but some have said to get this about peanut butter consistency and put about a 1/4 inch thick layer over the entire surface. You will eventually sand this off with really heavy grit sandpaper. I hit this with 40 grit sandpaper to give it the final shape that I'm looking for. After that, I very quickly went over it with 80 grit before getting ready to put the epoxy on. And here's after the 80 grit sandpaper. Again, most of the microbloons does come completely off. Now I'm adding a very thin layer of epoxy to the fiberglass piece, squeegeeing that on, and actually taking most of it all back off again. And this will fill in all the little scratches and pinholes. I'll let that dry for about 3 to 4 hours, and then repeat this process about 3 times or so. And you should have a nice smooth piece after the 3rd or 4th time. After the epoxy dries, I scuff it with 220 sandpaper and give it a light coat of primer. Here I'm just test fitting it along the windshield and fuselage. Took the flaperons from the hangar back to the house. Got those cleaned up. Next thing is to get the counterbalance weights. I took those out of the box. They were sitting on my shelf for a long time. Got those out. Started doing some research about exactly do I want to lighten these up. So first thing I'm going to do is drill some holes down in it. And I was hoping to drill from the back side. I saw several people drill in like 2 or 3 holes in the very back going to the front and taking a lot of material out that way. And then you could add like sinkers or weight of some sort, then seal the back of it off as you need to. You can do some fine-tune adjusting that way. I had a hard time finding a way to drill that straight line going from the back to the front in a perfect manner. I couldn't get it set up really well on my drill press, so I ended up drilling from the top bottom. I drilled like a size 30 hole all the way through it in 4 locations, and then I came back with I believe it was like a 7/16 inch drill bit and drilled 4 holes down the center of the smaller 30 size, not quite to the bottom, just shy maybe 3/16 or so inch from the bottom, so it didn't go all the way through with the bigger size drill bit. Drilling that holes in this piece of steel was a very lengthy process. It took quite a bit of time. It was very messy. Several cuts all over my hands of getting the little fragments out of my drill bit. So it was a long, tedious process, but I believe I got it done. Next, I'm going to try to mount these guys onto the flaperons at this point and see if we can get this balanced. There's a gap right here, and it has to be 19 millimeters plus or minus 2 clearance, and they want it evenly spaced throughout this entire flaperon. This is the outboard one we're looking at now. I have a 19 millimeter block, and I made up a 17 one here after I got back to the house, because 19 is not going to fit. The 17 will barely go down in there, and it's pretty even, but it's barely touching the wood the entire span of this. And I really can't adjust this anymore. I have this, if you look down here, I have the flaperon almost resting on this arm right there. So in order to get more space, this flaperon needs to come down a little bit, and it can't come down anymore. And it's like that on both sides, so there's really no more adjusting to do on this as far as this one goes. And doing a quick test fit on the inboard, I have the same issue. So again, at least it's pretty evenly spaced throughout there, and I am getting my requirement, but just barely. Here I fitted the inboard flaperon plate that attaches the 2 flaperons together. That proved to be a little bit challenging. Let's just say it involved a little bit of 5-minute JB weld to hold things in position so I could drill for my rivets. Well, the flaperons, like I said, in order to get the even edge here, I did have to, let's see if I can get this wing flaperon attach bracket from the wing. I did have to put the flaperons resting right on that when I made the drilling, and I took about maybe a 1/16 off just so that wouldn't rub when that moves. And I had to do that to each one of these flaperon attached brackets coming off the wing there. And this right side is nice and smooth. The balances just perfectly. No real issues with that side at all. The left one, a little bit more challenging. The inboard section was actually hitting the side of the fuselage, and I'm guessing that's probably because the wings were slightly swept back. But this one, it pretty much, the flaperon stays pretty much where you put it. And that worked out okay, I guess. I don't like it. I wish it was just like the other side, but like I said, it kind of is rubbing it a little bit. I'll probably end up putting a little spacer kind of right underneath this section right here. Flaperons are on. I went ahead and riveted all my counterweight balances. They're riveted on. And I just didn't put a bolt through this bracket yet.